Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jim Hodgson. I'm with Garry Goff. Gary's here, and we've also got Steve Jacobson with us. There's Steve. And we're here at the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, home of the most touchable warbirds in Texas. It's July 4th, so happy 4th of July to everybody. And we're going to be talking about carrier operations today. Hi, Doc. Good to see you. Hi, Karen. So let's see. There we go. Okay. So we're going to talk about carrier operations today, and we're going to start out with the F4, and then we're going to talk about carrier operations with the A7. Jake is a double centurion, which means he's got at least 200 traps on an aircraft carrier, and he'll talk about that a little bit. I'm the junior guy here. I've got about 40 or 45 traps. Most of those were training command traps.
And I'm an Air Force guy, so I got 0.
So Gary's got 0. So what we're going to talk a little bit about is we're going to start out with arriving at the boat. And you arrive at the boat in formation. You're off to the right-hand side of the boat, so the boat is down to your left as you come in. And normally, Jake, what altitude were we at for that? About 800 feet?
Typically, the break altitude would be 1,200
1,200,
feet.
Okay.
And then descend to 600 downwind. Beam the LSO platform, 180 position basically, then you descend to 450 feet with constant turn.
Okay. So this is a very tight pattern, and it's essentially a racetrack pattern. But you're going to have other airplanes in the area when you're coming in. There's usually going to be a helicopter, which is the Angel, which is going to be off to the right of the boat, and a little bit to the front or to the back. You may have, in the case of the training command, we would have safety pilots who would be at other altitudes off to the left-hand side of the boat, and everybody would be spaced out. What kind of spacing were you using with the A7?
Well, the ship wanted us to have the airplane at the ramp every 60 seconds.
60
that
seconds.
In IFR, night operations. Daytime, they get that down to about 45 to 55 seconds.
So 45 seconds. Think about that. Every 45 seconds, somebody is hitting the cable and stopping the jet on the deck, and then they got to move it out of the way for the next guy. 45 seconds.
And this is it's a very, very high tempo operation. And the other thing that most people aren't aware of is that there's very little radio communications going on. So when you'd come in, you'd get on the brake, you'd come downwind and get ready to make your turn and come around to the boat. This is the first time you talk to anybody for the most part, and as you're turning the corner, the LSO is going to tell you, Shamrock 201, call the ball, which means when you come around and you get in the slot, you're looking for the meatball, which is a lenticular lens system on the left-hand side of the landing area that shows you when you are on the proper glide slope to bring the airplane in. So let's show people the lights on the front of the F4 here. So you've got a particular glide slope that's about a 3.5 degree glide slope. And so the first thing they want to know is when you come around that you see the ball. So you see the meatball, and you're going to call something like Shamrock 201 2.6 ball, which in the 2.6 means that's my fuel state. And so they know that they know what your fuel is when you're coming in. Now the lights that you're seeing here are the speed lights. You've got these in the cockpit, and these out on the outside are for the LSO to be able to see. You've got a green light, which means that you're fast. You've got a yellow light, which means essentially you're on speed. You've got a red light, which means you're slow. So what other kind of calls are you going to get from the LSO when you roll into the slot, Jake?
If you're doing everything right, you're going to just give you a Roger ball. You know you have communications, and you'll just keep coming. But if you need to make corrections, if you're starting to get slow, give you a power call. Throttle. If you're constantly changing your lineup because the ship driving away from you, the angle of deck of the carrier is 10 degrees off the heading of the ship.
Yeah, so if you're looking at a palm of a hand here, you're landing on the thumb. So as the boat is moving away, you're not looking right down the runway. So you're constantly adjusting for the crotch.
Correction to the right. And the smaller the ship, the more critical the lineup. If you get more than 6 feet off center line, they'll send you around. So you'll have to wave off.
what is one of the reasons why getting slow coming aboard an aircraft carrier is so dangerous?
Because that's where you get high sink rates. You can't keep up with, if you get like on the A7 at max landing weight, your on-speed angle of attack is 138 knots, which is about 155 miles an hour. But if you get much below that, then you're getting on the backside of the power curve. And if you get a sink rate going, you may not be able to overcome it. And you've only got 16 feet of clearance before you get back into the boat. So that's a steady state sink.
And I would imagine as you're, if this is the deck of the boat, if you get slow, and I would imagine there's been airplanes that have hit the back end. And like I would assume like the cockpit would just fly off and the rest of the aircraft is going down there and he's just riding along as you're skidding across the deck.
The guy I replaced did exactly that.
Did you live through that?
He did miraculously. So I didn't do it.
Holy
That's
cow.
how I wound up with A7. That was the good thing to and this guy was out for his vision nightfall and they were out of conditions they shouldn't have been.
Brand new.
Well, now Jake is talking about fleet operations, and mostly I operated in the training command as a student and then as an instructor pilot. And one of the things we did with students is we spent a day of them watching what are referred to as carrier mishaps, because you had to get a certain level of fear into these guys. Well, you figure most of the students, by the time they're going to the boat, they've got 150, 160 hours. They're almost to the end of it. They're feeling pretty cocky and pretty salty. And you've got to put the fear of God into them, that it doesn't take much to turn that airplane into a pile of rubble.
And you're coming aboard in a single seat jet, and Jim is flying the F4 to the boat, and he's got a Rio in the back seat. Now, did the guy in the back seat for you, Jim, did he just sit there and pray a lot, hoping you were going to get on the aircraft carrier and he would live? Or does the Rio in the back seat actually do something for you as the guy bringing it aboard?
Well, the praying helps. And in my case, there was probably a lot of that. But no, what he's doing, he's reminding you about lineup and scan. You're not looking inside the airplane when you're doing this kind of stuff. You know, this isn't something you're looking inside at instruments. You're totally 100% outside, and it's total concentration. So they're going to give you little reminder calls. They're going to give you airspeed. They're going to give you attitude. They're going to give you lineup calls. And they're going to be running the radios and talking to anybody that on the ship that's talking to you, like the LSOs. And that kind of thing. So it's very much a crew concept here, and it takes both of you to get this hog on the boat.
Okay, and so then we go to a single seat A7 driver. You don't have anybody talking to you. I can only imagine your scan must be going 1,000,000 miles an hour to be able to look and see what's my speed, or do you have other indications that you're getting slow or getting fast because of the light and the meatball situation?
Well, you have an indicator called an indexer in the cockpit. It's the same lights that
I got you.
The same lights that Jim was talking about, and you've got that in your peripheral vision, and that's your speed reference. You're not even looking at the airspeed.
Yeah, it's right out in front of you on the glare shield, so it's constantly within your view. It's on the left-hand side, so as you're making that turn in, you're constantly seeing that. And I guess the other thing, we take a second nature, but it probably bears worth reminding people that if you got high on the glide slope, that means you reduced power. You didn't put the nose down, because if you put the nose down, now you're going to get fast, and now you're going to be overpowered and fast. So you controlled your elevation on the glide slope with power, and you controlled airspeed with the pitch of the airplane.
So you kept the same attitude regardless of your speed. That was the whole idea as you come aboard the boat and hit the boat.
Yeah, you're flying angle of attack.
Angle of attack all the way down. When you hit the boat, when you actually arrive, do you know, like, how long does it take? Do you know that you've caught a wire or that you've got to bolt and get out of there? Is it like instantaneous?
Well, you just assume that you're going to do a bolt or you're going to miss the wire.
So every landing is, I'm bolting,
Yeah.
and you're surprised if you catch it.
As soon as the wheels hit the deck, you go to full power, and if you miss the wire, the engine has time to accelerate. You just go to full power and rotate, and go up to an angle of attack and fly it off. And if you catch a wire, you don't have to worry about dragging an 85,000 ton carrier.
Yes. Okay, and when you would come arrival pattern in there, how many touch and goes did you have enough fuel to do before you had to go get fuel before you landed? In other words, how many times could I miss before I'm out of gas?
It depended on the airplane. The fighters had a lot less to play with. The A7 had a fan jet engine, and we learned about a couple hundred pounds of pass. So we had several attempts on the deck. The fighters had come back, and their max landing weight was so low anyway, and they burned more fuel per pass. On a good day, they'd have about 3 passes in the deck, and then landing tanker.
And for those who don't know, in the Navy, as opposed to the Air Force, which I flew, you make a distinction between a fighter aircraft and an attack aircraft.
Right.
Okay, and the fighter guys are weenies, and the attack guys are real men.
Fighter pilots are air to air, and the attack pilots are air to mud.
Air to mud, dropping a lot of weight. Now, has anybody caught a wire and it snaps the wire?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
is that
rare.
called something? Is that a special term or anything like that?
What happens is typically in that situation, if the wire breaks, I've only seen one of them myself personally, but it does happen. And if they're maintaining the rest of gear properly, the wires inspected, it shouldn't happen. The leading cause of it is setting the rest of gear on airplane. Because you're mixing airplanes and gross weights. And the one I selected, the landing, the wire, the rest of gear was set from the NFA Crusader.
Gigantic. Those things are
And
massive.
Jake, show everybody with your hand how big the wires are. It's about 3 inches in diameter, if not bigger.
That's basically
Yeah.
it.
So it's not just a little wire that you're catching when you're coming down and hooking up.
And when this thing snaps, I can only imagine, dude, you've got a loose snake going out there basically. It'll take people's heads off or whatever.
Let's start to walk over towards
Go
the
to
A7.
Go show them your bird.
Well, we'll maybe get out of the noise
Out of the noise.
noise area here.
Okay.
One of the things that amazed me, and you're not used to this, you're not used to the tempo of operation on the deck when you're practicing to go out there. And they would tell you that when you first come in and you trap, you're almost going to hardly be stopped, and there's going to be a guy right out in front of you telling you, the wire runners and the plane captains telling you to pick up your hook and then follow them. And they're going to tell you to stay off the nose wheel steering, and that they're going to guide you around on the deck. The deck is such a high frequency of operation, and it's so confusing that a lot of it is just because let me step back. The confusing part that it's so noisy, you can hardly hear your own jet running. You hear the air conditioner running, and so you've got people talking in your ear. The people on the ground aren't talking to you. It's all hand signals. So when you're seeing a deck guy, and you'll see this in some of the movies and the clips, if their hand motions are below their waist, they're talking to people on the deck. And if their hand motions are up above their waist, they're talking to the pilots.
Now, I assume this is the bar that goes down in the cat.
That's the launch bar.
That's the launch bar. Okay. When this thing shoots you off the deck, and you pick the gear up, I assume it just retracts up in there and it folds up. And now, if it comes down, do you have like a safety light or something to know whether or not something's in the way, or whether is there indications in the cockpit that this thing is up and locked or down or whatever it is? Okay.
This thing, you have a switch that's right on the deck, tags across the shuttle, locks it up.
Okay.
It locks it up. And then weight off the gear, the cap will shut. It comes up all day.
Okay. Almost spring loaded to come.
So as opposed to the A4, for instance, it had a bridle. It had a bridle that went up and fastened in the hooks and stayed with the boat when it launched. This doesn't have to have a bridle. This is all self-contained.
I look at the F4, and when I see the F4 and its height off of the gear height off of the deck, and I look over here at your A7, that's not a whole lot of runway clearance. How? I mean, you must have significant shock absorber or something, because it appears as if you're gonna try and catch one of these wires and you just slam this thing on the ground, that it's gonna just tear the bottom of this bird up.
Well, this one here, the struts are not surface.
Okay.
They would be about half the end spar out.
Because there's no way you can bring that thing aboard.
Well,
so holy cow, that's like inches off the ground.
And then you look at the F4, and you'll notice when they're on the cat being launched, the nose is way up.
There, Jack,
Well,
way up.
Signal they get from the cat, the same engine, they took the nose off.
Now, did you have to do that in the A7?
The nice thing, they said was subsonic wing. And,
Right, there's a serious camber in that wing. It's going to fly.
It was made for a whole bomb. It's a dump truck.
Did you? I love it, a dump truck. 2 men in a truck. Did you ever have to come aboard with ordnance still hanging, or did you always release the ordnance out in the water? You could never come aboard with hung ordnance or anything like that.
We could bring a certain amount of it back. We tried to jettison it if we could. And if we couldn't jettison, the normal thing is you had a field that rained, you would bird and make it down.
Then you come back, okay? And one of the other big questions that we see in some of the World War II carrier landings when there's a big mishap, I assume if you lose hydraulics on this bird, that you're going to take a big, huge, giant net. What's that? What's that thing called?
The barrier.
The barrier. Yeah. See, in the Air Force, we call the cable the barrier.
Yeah.
So, and you're going to run the big, huge strings, and you're going to run into that. Is that when you lose hydraulics, or would the Navy rather you just jettison the airplane and punch out?
Well, it depends on the failure, the loss of the cat. Barricade usually was used if you had a hook on the thing is snugger that holds the hook down. That's as long as the Army, you don't need to stop fire.
And when you come aboard, do you know if you've taken a 1-wire or a 3-wire or 4-wire? Do you know, or is it like all the same?
Generally wouldn't unless you're on this boat like I was on. This you got the 4-wire, you get the end of the boat out of the 4-wire.
You're looking at the water.
Blue water down there.
Yeah, the gray deck just blue.
And how high is the deck typically above the water for an aircraft? Are we 50 feet, 100 feet? 65? Okay.
And
That's a long way up.
And the newer ones are even taller. They're like 80 feet.
That's a long, and I would assume when you're taxiing around and moving, that if somebody's not careful, they could get blown off the deck. Do you lose a lot of people on a cruise, or did guys get blown off?
That happens occasionally. That's why we have the jet blast reflector and captain that keeps the jet blast unless you're standing in the wrong place.
Right. And I would imagine too, these big, huge danger, is so somebody's not walking around here and gets sucked in.
And that happens.
And that happens.
And
Somebody
that
gets sucked
happens.
in.
This intake right here, the flow rate is such that when it's at full power, the captain will suck the crescent wrench flat off the deck.
Mercy.
Well, and
That would not be any fun.
that's the thing about the deck. It's so noisy, and it's so confined on some of the older boats that people had to have their heads on a swivel constantly. You can go to YouTube and you can find people getting sucked in. There's a famous one of a guy getting sucked into an A6.
A6, that's right. I think I've seen that at night.
But he lived through that. But that's not always the case.
I've heard also, again, there's all sorts of rumors about you squids flying around in Marines, that typically you're going to lose a couple of aircraft every cruise. Are you losing them because they crash in the boat, or something just goes wrong and they get dumped in the water and the cat doesn't launch them off, or what's a typical way you guys lose it?
Well, ramp strikes for what? However bigger the ship nowadays, that happens once a week.
Okay.
This airplane that was flying off the risk
Oh, nice. Jets, yeah, little bitty.
We've got Calvin Gifford on here. Just mentioned, he said, I've been blown into the safety net twice, once by a Tomcat and once by a Prowler.
Dude!
So there are safety nets all around the side to try to...
Oh, there's nets that are around the deck.
Yeah.
Oh!
There's also one around the LSO platform. So if he thinks that you're going to hit the ramp, crash on the ramp, he moves toward the net. It takes everybody with it. Over the side, into the net, and back over the edge of the deck.
And after you would land, and everything's good, you landed and you're good to go, is somebody going to motion to you and you're going to bring your wingtips up right away because to reduce the space? So
You do it automatically.
Oh.
You bring the hook up